Focus on Headline. All right, let's take a look at what major issues are making the headlines today on Focus on Headline. For this, joining us in the studio today, we have our reporters Yoon Se-young and Hong Sa-young joining us as well. Guys, welcome back.
Hello.
We are going to start things off with North Korea. It's been a very tense couple of weeks here on the Korean Peninsula. We've seen North Korea just last week firing a wave of short-range ballistic missiles. That was followed by earlier this week an intermediate range ballistic missile as well. Well, it looks like on this Thursday, North Korea fired yet another 2 rounds of ballistic missiles into the EC. I believe this time around there was a short range and not an intermediate range ballistic missile. But this is the 6th launch in just 12 days. Se-young, let's kick things off with this. Give us the latest details.
Yes, the Joint Chief of Staff announced on Thursday they detected 2 short-range ballistic missiles, or SRBMs, fired into the EC from the Samseok area in Pyongyang between around 6 a.m. and 6:23 a.m., which is around 5 p.m. on Wednesday in Washington. According to JCS, the first missile flew 350 kilometers and reached a maximum altitude of 80 kilometers at speed of Mach 5, which means 5 times the speed of sound. And the second one flew 800 kilometers at 60 kilometers in altitude and speed of Mach 6. Thursday's missile launch was conducted over a very short period of time. Just 2 days ago, on Tuesday, it fired an intermediate-range ballistic missile, IRBM, over Japan, which was the North's first launch of an IRBM in 8 months. Indeed, like you said, Australia, North Korea has fired 6 missiles in just 12 days, once every other day on average. And in response, South Korean military said it will maintain a full readiness posture and is closely cooperating with the U.S. while strengthening surveillance and vigilance against North Korea. What was different this time was the location. North Korea usually uses Sunan area near Pyongyang when it conducts missile launches, but this time it fired missiles from Samseok area. And Samseok is located in the northeast of Daeseong district, central Pyongyang, and is located on the west bank of the Daedong River. And the South Korean and the U.S. authorities are still evaluating and analyzing the meaning of the Samseok area, the reason North chose Samseok this time to test fire the missiles. But given the types and locations of missiles recently launched by North Korea, experts say by launching a variety of missiles from unfamiliar locations in Pyongyang, North Korea is trying to be prepared for all possible scenarios on the battlefield. Now, taking a look at the reasons behind the North's continuing provocations in response to the North's ballistic missile launch over Japan, South Korea and the U.S. fired 4 missiles in total toward the waters east of the Korean Peninsula. Plus, the U.S. decided to redeploy its nuclear-powered aircraft carrier USS Ronald Reagan, which left South Korea less than a week ago in show of force. Speaking of USS Ronald Reagan, South Korea, the U.S. and Japan conducted another military drill on Thursday in the EC to respond to North Korea's nuclear and missile threats with a U.S. nuclear-powered aircraft carrier in presence. And South Korea, the U.S. and Japan really seem to try to strengthen their security cooperation by conducting joint exercise. This is the first time that such drill was conducted for 2 weeks in a row. And I'm very concerned about this tit-for-tat show of force because it's raising tensions not only on the Korean Peninsula but also around the globe. And going back to the reasons behind the North continuing provocations, on the other hand, some pundits say the recent missile launches are Pyongyang's way to respond to Tokyo, which expressed its willingness to have talks with Pyongyang. Addressing the UN General Assembly, Japan's Prime Minister Fumio Kishida said that Japan is prepared to engage in dialogue on matters of mutual concerns with North Korea, and he is willing to meet with Kim Jong-un without preconditions and will not miss no opportunity to take actions with all his dedication. It was a very strong and firm message. And launching missiles over Japanese territory may signal that North Korea rejects the proposal or maybe it's trying to raise tensions further to advance the dialogue. So for whatever reason, continued missile launches are raising tensions not only on the Korean peninsula but also around the world again, making the international situation unstable. But unfortunately, analysts believe such provocations, such missile tests are likely to continue for at least a month ahead of Communist Party Congress in China later this month and the U.S. midterm elections set to be held in early November.
Yeah, that intermediate range ballistic missile that they test fired, I don't think that's to raise tensions to further advance dialogue. I think North Korea has no intention of holding any kind of discussion. The reason why, there's a specific reason, I think, why they shot it over the Japanese airspace, and that's because, again, Japan was involved with the joint naval exercises. So that was the message. But the recent, this short-range ballistic missile that we saw them fire today was because the USS Ronald Reagan did a U-turn, right? He came back, right? Once the intermediate-range ballistic missile was shot over Japan, the USS Reagan just basically came back and said, oh, okay, we're going to start doing more drills then if you're going to be provoking us once again. And so in response to the USS Reagan coming back, Ronald Reagan coming back, they shot these two more ballistic missiles here. But again, that timeline there, in between the Communist Party Congress and the U.S. midterm elections to be held early November, they're saying in between those time might be when North Korea might test their nuclear weapon, their seventh nuclear test. That again, and if that does happen, what kind of response we'll see from the United States, South Korea, and I guess maybe even Japan as well, or the international community, we'll have to see. And amidst all the tensions on the Korean Peninsula and the missile provocations that we've been seeing, specifically today as well, President Yoon Suk-yeol calling for a stronger alliance with the U.S. and security cooperation with Japan. Sang, let's get the details of this.
Sure, SJ. So as our former reporter Hae-young mentioned about North Korea firing ballistic missiles into the East Sea today, in response to this, President Yoon has pledged a commitment to public safety and regional stability through active security collaboration with the U.S. and Japan. Yoon said that the security concern is very serious and he understands people are worried, but the government will thoroughly take care of people's lives and safety based on the strong South Korea and U.S. alliance and security cooperation between South Korea, the U.S., and Japan. The South Korea's National Security Council has strongly denounced Thursday's missile launches. Meanwhile, the President Yoon is scheduled to speak with his Japanese counterpart, Fumio Kishida, over the phone, including North Korea's missile tests over the Japanese territory earlier on Tuesday.
Yeah, there was talks that, reports that President Yoon and Prime Minister Fumio Kishida were to hold this phone talk. We haven't got any updates on that, so we don't know if the phone conversation has taken place just yet. But what are the possible topics that could be discussed during the phone call with President Yoon's Japanese counterpart, Fumio Kishida?
So there was a little bit of a news update. So the phone call did happen not too long ago, but there are possible topics that was brought up in the afternoon in the news articles was security issues related to North Korea's successive ballistic missile provocations. And when reporters asked President Yoon if topics other than North Korea ballistic missiles like the historical issues will be mentioned, Yoon replied saying that he cannot foretell what kind of topics will be mentioned in the phone call. He also told reporters that Japan is probably shocked over the IRBM missiles, which stands for the Intermediate Range Ballistic Missile, passed through the Japanese land, and Kishida probably wants to mention the security part. President Yoon also referred to Prime Minister Kishida's speech, saying Kishida made a prospective statement at the Japanese National Assembly. PM Kishida mentioned that Korea is an important neighbor to overcome the various international discourse and pending issues. So another topic that will be mentioned in the call would be about Korea and Japan relationship. In another speech at the parliament, PM Kishida also said that Japan would closely communicate with the Korean government, defining Korea as an important neighbor who should cooperate in responding to various tasks. in the international community.
Yeah, it's. I mean, again, I mean, we don't know what the topic of discussions between the two sides is, but I mean, if all the things that have happened so far, including the intermediate range ballistic missile being fired over the Japanese airspace and all the tensions on the Korean Peninsula, highly likely the vast majority of discussion is going to be based on the security issues, and maybe it's. Although I've always been keen on the two leaders talking about the historical issues, I think historical issues for now, today, is not the most important thing to talk about due to the tensions on the Korean Peninsula. In the meantime, the 15-member UN Security Council met on Wednesday to discuss North Korea's recent missile launches. This including that the one on Tuesday was the concerning one, because not only was it an intermediate range ballistic missile, because it went over the Japanese airspace was the big concern here. Sang, let's get the details of this.
The UN Security Council convened a meeting on Wednesday local time at the U.S. request to discuss how to handle the North's recent provocation. Not the Thursday's one, but the missile launch over Japanese territory, which was conducted on Tuesday, right? And it was the first time in more than 6 months that such meeting was convened to discuss North Korea's missile launches. And in the meeting, UN's Assistant Secretary General briefed the ambassador on the UN's response to the North's missile provocations, and he also delivered the message from Secretary General Antonio Guterres, who has strongly condemned Pyongyang's firing of missiles. At the same time, Washington also harshly criticized Beijing and Moscow, saying that the international community is trying to tighten sanctions on Pyongyang, but Beijing and Moscow are making it difficult by protecting the regime. In response, China argued that UN Security Council should find other ways than just relying on sanctions, calling for the UNSC to play a more constructive role in terms of Pyongyang's provocations. And Russia also, in terms of stopping the Pyongyang from making the provocation. And Russia also reiterated that imposing sanctions on North Korea is just a dead end with no result. China and Russia also blamed the U.S. for leading joint military exercise in the region, which provoked North Korea into acting. However, the U.S. rejected such remarks and made clear that there is no equivalency between the joint drills and missile launches. The meeting did not come up with any resolutions, such as making a joint statement or agreement on next steps in regards to North's record number of missile launches in recent months. But after meeting, South Korea, U.S., Japan, and other Western countries issued a separate statement urging North Korea to stop the provocation and return to dialogue, though.
Yeah, I mean, again, that's the always the drawback of, and then there's even people saying, what's the point of holding these UN Security Council meetings? And the biggest reason is because, again, China and Russia are going to continue to veto. They have to veto votes there, right? And so, I mean, China could be saying there's more constructive ways to handle North Korea. I don't know they don't want to hold any dialogue. And I think what North Korea wants at this time are sanctions relief, but are sanctions relief going to be enough for them to fully eliminate their nuclear development there?
I thought it was really interesting, Russia saying that imposing sanctions is not the answer because it's already
I mean, what are they going to say?
Put a lot of sanctions.
What are they going to say? I mean, Russia has been, again, a recipient of a number of sanctions, so not necessarily UNSC sanctions, because China is going to veto that, right? But they've been having like EU sanctions, they've had US sanctions. I mean, they're a huge recipient of a lot of sanctions, and they're not going to say anything positive about sanctions. And China, of course, is they've been sanctioned before by the US, not the UNSC, obviously, and so they're obviously going to say all the negative things about sanctions too. But again, it's a dead end here. But the biggest thing here is obviously to hold a dialogue. But North Korea has made it clear that they don't want to talk to the United States unless there's any kind of sanctions relief. The U.S., especially Biden, who surprisingly is more hawkish when it comes to North Korea than we thought he was going to be. He's not going to be pulling any sanctions relief. North Korea doesn't really like President Yoon Suk-yeol, it seems like, according to some of the messages that we've been seeing from Kim Yo-jong. So, I mean, there's just no dialogue, and it really is unfortunate here. Again, the key timeline is between sometime at the middle of this month and the beginning of November is going to be key here. Guys, let's talk oil here. For me, this is news that I watch very carefully. Fueling up my car is just ridiculous these days. The OPEC-plus and non-OPEC partners on Wednesday, they held a meeting over in Vienna. I believe this was like the first time they had face-to-face talks since the COVID-19 pandemic. They agreed to impose deep output cuts, seeking to spur recovery in oil prices. This despite the fact that the U.S. has been pressuring them to pump more. We need more oil. There's so many things going on right now, especially with Ukraine. Fuel prices are getting out of hand here. But tell us a little bit more about this, Soyoung.
Sure. To give you a background about this issue, I want to talk about how the Biden administration launched a full-scale pressure campaign to dissuade Middle Eastern allies from dramatically cutting oil production, according to multiple sources. However, this seems to have failed after Wednesday's crucial meeting of OPEC. The international cartel of oil producers announced that they will cut the output in an effort to raise oil prices. OPEC oil ministers meeting in Vienna agreed to an even larger production cut than the White House has feared, which is 2 million barrels per day. This is the largest reduction in production since the COVID-19 pandemic. As a result, OPEC oil-producing countries' crude oil production will be reduced to 41.85 million barrels per day. The ministers added that the cuts were very necessary in light of the uncertainty that surrounds the global economic and oil market outlooks.
Yeah, again, I mean, it's as people, us who need oil and oil prices. I don't know if you guys drive around, but fuel prices has been just ridiculous these days, even right now. And then we started seeing it went down from like over 2,001 per liter. Now it's dipped down to like 1,800 something. So we're seeing a decline, but now it might spike back up. And what they're saying is OPEC-plus, they're saying a lot of our members are just unable to meet the quota. So what's the point of pumping more oil? And also, when things were good for them, it was like $120 a barrel for them. Now it's dipped down to $80 a barrel. Listen, I mean, we need to make money too, and we've lost out on so much money during the pandemic when there was just no demand, there was no traveling going on. So now, I think cartel's a very interesting word. I think it's a fitting word for them. They basically control the prices here. Obviously, as we talked about, the U.S. had been pressuring the OPEC-plus members to pump more, but this is not happening. How did the White House react to this latest decision?
So first of all, President Joe Biden told CNN that he was concerned about the cuts and he viewed it unnecessary. So overall, the White House said in a statement that Biden was disappointed by the short-sighted decision by OPEC to cut production quotas while the global economy is dealing with the continued negative impact of Russia invading Ukraine. With this, Biden had directed the Department of Energy to release another 10 million barrels from Strategic Petroleum Reserve next month. Meanwhile, OPEC Secretary General Al-Ghais defended the group's decision to impose deep output cut, saying OPEC was seeking to provide security and stability to energy markets.
Yeah, basically the White House was saying that, this is a pretty good reason for why we need to rely less on oil from the OPEC plus countries. But the fact is, they have the vast majority of the oil pumping capabilities. What are we going to do? We said the same thing about Russia, right? We're going to cut our imports of Russian energy, and look what it resulted in. Even with this, I think it's going to be quite difficult. So for the time being, it does seem like oil prices are going to go up once again. Cam413, welcome back to the show. She says gas is over $6 a gallon for her. My truck only gets 16 miles per gallon. I've lived in Korea for such a long time now that I can't do gallons. We're a liter. People, I believe there's something like almost like 4 liters to a gallon. And so it's right now 1,800. Let's see, multiply that by 4. That's like 7,201. It's about the same price as it is right now. $6 a gallon.
The 1 year Arirang is only 17 something.
17 something?
Yeah, 17
but that's gasoline, right?
Yes, gasoline.
I drive a diesel SUV,
Really?
and diesel's more expensive now.
Diesel, including the producer,
and
the diesel drivers are
I bought a
going
diesel
crazy
car
these days.
because it was far cheaper than gasoline. And look what it came back to me now. It came back to me. And then watch, I'm going to buy a new car, and then it's going to be gasoline, and then diesel prices are going to drop down again. Other news here, Korea's industrial electricity consumption increased about 5-fold in the past 30 years. This marks the second highest growth rate amongst OECD countries. But industrial electricity rates have only risen about 53% over that 30-year period, which is still very low compared to other major countries. Seong, what is this all about? Tell us more.
Well, according to reports released by International Energy Agency on Thursday, Korea's industrial electricity consumption growth rate from 1990 to 2019 stood at 372%, ranked second among OECD countries. During the same period, industrial power consumption in the United States and the United Kingdom fell by 14% and 9% respectively, while France increased by 1%, Japan decreased 19%. As you can see from the data, South Korea's industrial electricity consumption has increased steeply over the past 30 years, but the increase rate in industrial electricity bills was only 53%, remarkably low compared to Japan, which increased by 82%, France with 229% of increase, Germany 159%, and the UK 181%. And most OECD countries have seen energy consumption decline even with a GDP increase since the 2000s. But Korea's energy consumption has continued to increase with economic growth. And for that reason, experts point out that low industrial electricity prices have hampered energy efficiency improvement. Especially here in South Korea, energy-related companies account for only 0.4% of all electricity users, consume over 60% of the total amount of electricity available. And basically, while industrial electricity demand went up, the rate did not increase much, and it negatively affected the overall industry. On top of that, as KEPCO, state-run utility Korea Electric Power Corporation, which remained deep in the red for a long time, decided to raise electricity bill amid soaring global energy prices due to the war in Ukraine and the freeze in electricity bills. There has been growing calls for increasing the cost of energy purchases by raising electricity bills imposed on big companies, not ordinary households. And recognizing such problem, KEPCO also decided to raise residential and industrial electricity bills starting from October. And under the new measures now, residential electricity bills will go up 7.41 per kilowatt hour, a monthly increase of 2,271 for an average household of 4 people consuming 307 kilowatt hours. Meanwhile, industrial electricity bills will go up as much as 16.61 per kilowatt hour. And some people worry about the further inflation, saying that if industrial electricity costs rise, prices in general will also go up. But pundits say the impact of increase in industrial electricity bills on manufacturing sector will be limited. And experts also say that raising industrial electricity rates could also help companies overcome trade deficit by improving energy efficiency. Actually, according to the KEPCO Management Research Institute, when annual electricity consumption is reduced by 10% as of this year, energy imports will decrease by 7%, which can improve the trade deficit by 59.0% in the first half.
Yeah, but it just seems like every year we're just using more electricity. I mean, even like just households, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you look at an average household now, we have like all these things that use electricity now. Everyone has like bigger air conditioners, they have bigger televisions, they have, bigger computers, and they have bigger
air
everything.
Purifier.
Everyone has an air purifier now, and then now it's wintertime and you need a humidifier, and then there's like everything is electrical, and that was the big problem that we had this year. Was like, I think this year was like, it was hot, but it wasn't like record hot temperatures. But yet we saw like ridiculously amount of like electricity being used, right? It was, and then of course the government was pushing for more people to, use less electricity. But yeah, it's a difficult thing with the industrial sector, because if you're telling to, if you're going to increase the electricity bill and things like
prices
that,
will go up.
Yeah, prices are going to go up, and they fear like there's going to be, then it's going to affect the economy and things like that. And so, I could do with, what is it, 2,000 2,271 increase for a four-person household.
You can handle that?
I could handle that. It's not that bad. I think Korean electricity is cheap in the first place.
Right.
Let's talk about the foreign reserves now. This plunged nearly $20 billion in a month as foreign exchange authorities released the dollar to prevent the $1 exchange rate from soaring once again. Sung, what do you have on this?
Sure. So first of all, I would like to mention about the value of the local currency right now, which closed at 1,402.41, and it fell down by 7.71. Even with the foreign exchange reserves plunging by nearly $20 billion in a month, the Bank of Korea issued a statement that there is no need to worry about the foreign exchange crisis, as foreign exchange reserves are the world's 8th largest. And according to the statistics on foreign exchange reserves released by the Bank of Korea on the 6th, foreign exchange reserves as of the end of September were $416.77 billion, down to $16.66 billion from $436.43 billion at the end of August. This is the biggest decline of all since 13 years and 11 months of the 2008 financial crisis.
Can you tell us, give us a bit of a background on the decline of the foreign reserves here, and why is the Bank of Korea telling us not to worry about this? Because the figures are quite, concerning, and especially when you're talking about anytime you say this is like the biggest decline since blah blah blah, and then they refer to the last time, and it's the 2008 financial crisis.
Right.
It's always concerning. So tell us more.
Sure. So Oh Geung-hwa, the director of Bank of Korea's International Bureau, explained the reason behind the decline in foreign exchange reserves is due to the measures to ease volatility in the foreign exchange market and decrease in dollar conversion of other currency foreign assets to the appreciation of the dollar. When someone asked him if the won and dollar's defense was successful last month, Director Oh replied saying that they are not intervening in the foreign exchange market as a target for a specific exchange rate, adding if there is a supply-demand imbalance in the domestic foreign exchange market, that they will intervene to prevent markets from leaning to one side. So in short, he thinks that foreign exchange market did help restore its function. Director Oh also added that it is not very suitable to describe the Korean economy as the foreign exchange crisis. As the foreign exchange crisis back in 2008, March to November, foreign exchange reserves fell by an average of $7 billion to $8 billion per month. However, the recent decline was $4.77 billion per month between the period of October 2021 to September 2022.
I'm still concerned, to be honest with you. Don Pak says two things in particular are increasing in price: energy, like gas and electricity, and food prices. These are things we need and depend on. Well, you know what I also need and depend on is my salary. That's not going up. And I think same thing could be said about everyone at this time. Everything is going up except for your pay right now. Still very happy.
Problem,
but I'm still happy working. I'm still happy, very much happy working right now. So I'm not going to complain here.
Right?
Staying with the economy here, the U.S. government has begun collecting opinions to come up with detailed regulations on providing subsidies under the Inflation Reduction Act. The domestic auto industry is paying attention to whether or not there's going to be any kind of solution to minimize the impact on the South Korean automakers. Also, we had reports yesterday that President Joe Biden sent a written letter to President Yoon Suk-yeol saying that they might come up with a solution here. Seong, tell us more about this.
Yes, over the past few months since August, the South Korean government has consistently expressed its concerns over IRA through various consultation channels and meetings, including the recent one with U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris. And like you said, earlier this week, President Biden also sent a letter to President Yoon to say that he's well aware of South Korea's concerns. And the reasons why South Korean lawmakers, government officials, and even president continuously conveyed its stance was because they believed that adjusting detailed regulations would reduce the damage to the Korean automobile industry to some extent. However, to be honest with you, since the president of the U.S. signed IRA into the law with overwhelming support from the public and environmental groups, the basic structure of the law is highly unlikely to be changed by but South Korea still hopes for some easing measures such as a grace period. But pundits say it is still unclear whether South Korea's request will be accepted. And the U.S. Treasury Department and the Internal Revenue Service, IRS, announced on Wednesday that they will collect public opinions, including stakeholders, until November 4th regarding various tax benefits paid through the IRA. And the core of the law is finer assembly in North America to be available for subsidies for electric vehicles worth up to $7,500. And unless this phrase is changed, even with small changes in details, most experts say the domestic South Korean automakers will greatly suffer. And although the subsidy varies depending on how much parts manufactured or assembled in North America are used for batteries and how much core minerals are sourced and processed in which country, since all electric vehicles from domestic automakers are now produced in Korea, battery-related standards are not very meaningful either. And Hyundai Motor Group signed a deal to invest $5.54 billion to build an electric vehicle-only factory in a battery cell plant in Georgia, the U.S., but it is expected to be completed as early as 2025. So it will be inevitable for domestic automakers to suffer this immensely negative obstacle in the U.S. market for more than 2 years. The South Korean government still say, though, it will continue to closely work with related ministries and industry to find a breakthrough. And although it has various consultation channels, Seoul is also going to submit an opinion.
Yeah, I mean, we've already had reports that sales of Hyundai's Ioniq 5 and Kia's EV6, I believe, the sales of that dipped ever since the IRA was signed into law back in August. But I mean, even though pundits are saying that, it's highly unlikely that they're, going to exempt South Korea. I mean, we had also other experts saying that, this whole law, Biden's pushing this so that they could get votes, right? So that the Democrats could get votes for the midterm elections. And so the consensus, some of the pundits are saying, well, after the midterm elections and, all the votes are in and things like that, maybe then they could start talking to South Korea. And even a grace period is good. But I remember Nordin, I don't think Nordin, you're tuning into our show today, but one of our listeners pitched an interesting idea because final assembly in North America is the key, right? And so he was saying, what if then South Korea just starts building plants in Canada or something like that? Technically, it's still North America,
but it's still gonna take some time, right?
Yeah,
at least a few years.
Right? But would Biden be happy with that? Right? No, I probably not. The word North America, I think, has no meaning. It has to be like in the United States. But yeah, grace period, I think, could be the next best option, if not an exemption that South Korea could get. Moving on here, there's the report of overseas investment review bill that could be a problem or even an opportunity for South Korea. Why is that? Tell us more about this, Hyung.
Sure, to start with, the U.S. Congress is discussing the legislation titled the National Critical Capabilities Defense Act of 2022, which regulates U.S. companies' investment in high-tech technologies in concerned countries such as China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea. The final bill has yet to be made public, but according to the most recent bill, it applies to national core competencies such as semiconductors, batteries, major minerals, pharmaceuticals, artificial intelligence, quantum tech, and bioeconomics. The analysis showed that the Overseas Investment Review Bill, which the U.S. is pushing to prevent the leakage of high-tech technologies that have a significant impact on national security, could be a crisis and opportunity for South Korea. So there is a possibility of the U.S. side asking the South Korean government to make the public high-tech investment screening of Korean companies more difficult or try to apply the law to foreign companies at all. So it is generally expected that the bill will not be processed in a short period of time. So there is a possibility that the President Joe Biden administration will introduce the system ahead of the Congress through executive order, and the NDAA is expected to be discussed in earnest after the November midterm elections.
Again, after the November midterm elections, right? I mean, not too far away. We've got about a month until then. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of discussions at hand here. Moving on here, coming back to South Korea, amid controversy, South Korea announcing new plans on Thursday aimed at abolishing the Ministry of Gender Equality and Family. This was, of course, one of the pledges made by President Yoon during his campaign pledge times, but also upgrading the Ministry of Patriots and Veterans Affairs, establishing Overseas Koreans Office. These, again, are all pledges of President Yoon Suk-yeol, what he would do if he was the president, and he is the president now. We're seeing this happen. Seong, give us the latest on this.
Lee Sang-min, Interior and Safety Minister, announced a reorganization plan on Thursday, saying the Yoon Suk-yeol administration will do its best to realize the pledges Yoon made to make a better society. The reform plan calls for abolishing the Ministry of Gender Equality and Family and transferring related tasks to the Ministry of Health and Welfare to establish a new headquarters that oversees comprehensive life cycle management policies and gender equality. As a result, the Ministry of Gender Equality and Family has disappeared into history 21 years after its launch. And the women's employment sector, which was in charge of the Ministry of Gender Equality and Family, will be inherited by the Labor Ministry against backlash from civic groups from South Korea and also across the world, arguing that it will have a detrimental impact on South Korea and other countries in Asia-Pacific region as well. Meanwhile, the Ministry of Patriots and Veterans Affairs is upgraded to a ministry level. Now it became an independent ministry. And a new sub-ministry level agency handling consular affairs and services, Overseas Koreans Agency, will also be newly established. Meanwhile, President Yoon's pledges to establish the National Aeronautics and Space Administration was not included on the plan announced on Thursday and is expected to be carried out later.
Very quickly, to round things out, obviously we had the main opposition Democratic Party reacting their response to the latest announcement there. Seo-young, what did they say?
So the Democratic Party has expressed concerns on abolishing the gender ministry. So for instance, Oh Young-hwan, the spokesman for the DP, told the reporters that when the Minister of Gender Equality and Family was demoted to vice minister level headquarters, there are serious concerns and problems regarding the possibility of weakening functions, such as negotiating powers with other ministries. He also talked about the stalking murders of Shindang Station and crimes against women internationally, and United Nations recommending the need for independent ministries related to gender equality be established. And DP agreed to the reorganization plan of Veteran Affairs Agency elevating to the ministry level and establishment of the Overseas Koreans Office. Spokesman Oh said he agrees with the importance of veterans as there were related discussions during the Moon Jae-in government, adding that the Overseas Korean Office was also a pledge of our party and there are demands from both inside and outside the party. So he does agree with the need to strengthen the policies of overseas Koreans as there are bills proposed by the DP.
All right. One of those rare times that there are two sides could actually come to an agreement here. Guys, it's all the time that we have for now, but thank you as always for your report. Please stay safe and we'll see you guys again.
See you.
Thank you.
You can listen to Korea Now with me, SJ Lee, by downloading the Arirang radio application or tune in online by visiting www.arirangradio.com. So make sure you tune in Mondays through Fridays, 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. Korea time.